Well, welcome. This is your Anxiety Toolkit. Today I have a special guest, my very dear friend Zoe Gillis, to talk about the importance of bringing nature into our lives and how we can go about doing that and the importance of it. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you so much for having me,
Yeah,
Kimberly.
I
I
love.
love this podcast. I think you do an amazing job of making anxiety and depression and ways to deal with it really accessible, and I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. No, I feel the same way about you. So let me tell you guys a little bit about Zoe. Zoe is a licensed and marriage family therapist, similar to me. We actually went and did our master's degree together, and you have a practice in Eagle Rock, yeah,
Silver Lake.
Silver Lake, excuse me. But Zoe also has an additional treasure or passion, which is her Zee Adventures. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your practice and Zee Adventures?
Sure. Well, I actually just came from a Hike to Meditate event today, uh, which is why I'm wearing a baseball cap and dressed pretty casual for those of you that are listening. But so Zee Adventures, I started my path of bringing mindfulness into the outdoors because John Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as paying attention in the moment on purpose with a non-judgmental perspective. And what I love about the wilderness is that it puts you in this state of not judging. So you're not outside looking at the ocean or the trees and going, if it was just a little bit taller, like then it would be better. And so I think that it has this ability to bring us into the moment and connect us to our senses that I really love. And so I think it complements mindfulness and healing and personal growth in that way really well.
I love that, and I love the way that you're really bringing it all together. That you are literally complementing them, which is so awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you do with Zee Adventures. Like, what does that entail?
So I offer two different types of wilderness retreats. One is a 3-day base camping retreat, and I take people to places like Joshua Tree or the Kern River, places in Southern California at this point. And we immerse ourselves in nature and we practice mindfulness and meditation and journaling. And every night we come together around the fire and we do counsel, which is one of my favorite parts. And to just speak from the heart and listen to the heart and share in experiences and fears and hopes. So I really love that part of the retreats. And then being outside is so nice because you're under the stars, which is incredible. And, it puts you in this very relaxed state and an open place. And so I do that. And then I also offer backpacking trips. And so those are a little bit more physically challenging. But like last year, I had two women who were in their 60s come on one of the trips. And because the focus is on more about connecting and understanding ourselves, we go at a slower pace and we make sure that everybody is taken care of. We do walking meditation and really use that challenges that come up with backpacking because it's hard. You have a pack and you have to learn how to go to the bathroom outdoors and cook outdoors, and there's all these challenges that come up. But what that does is it gives us the opportunity to practice in working through all the ways that we tend to deal with challenges in our own lives. So you had asked me a question earlier about what personal challenges that nature has helped me with. And it's really helped me understand. So for me, the biggest thing that comes up is insecurity or
Mm,
self-doubt. And when I'm backpacking and I'm hiking for 4 or 5 miles, I get to really observe what that self-doubt is like, what it tells me, what it feels like in my body, and even how long it lasts. So when you're hiking for 5 miles, it has time to fully come and fully go. And watching it come and go like that throughout the day without being distracted, because when we're in life and we have a moment of insecurity, then an email comes or something happens, and then all of a sudden we're off running to the next thing. And so being in nature slows that all down, and it really allows us to get familiar and learn how to be more comfortable being uncomfortable.
so cool. I mean, the way you're explaining it, again, it makes me sort of just want to pack my bags and go.
Yeah,
And because I think what you're really saying too is you're such an observer that here, if in my office, you've been out hiking, I have spent the whole day in my office so far. If self-doubt comes, it's so easy just to open Facebook and do that, and not really take that observation and be mindful. Whereas you're saying like this is really making you look at yourself in a mirror ultimately.
yes, and without mirrors, which is really nice.
So true. That's so true.
I love
Right.
that too.
Yeah. And that's the cool part, that you take away that analytical piece where you are comparing and all that.
Yeah.
So
It,
cool.
it really switches the perspective from looking at yourself either like in the mirror or through other people's eyes, and really puts the focus back in internally looking out,
Right.
you know?
Is that hard for people who are with you, who are really, really critical of themselves? Do you find them having to wrestle with feeling inadequate with their hiking abilities or comparison? Is that something that comes up a lot on your retreats and on your hikes?
Yes, it definitely is. I think one of the biggest fears that often comes up is not being able to keep up, worrying about holding back the group or being a burden on the group. And so, again, I think that these are fears that aren't just coming up because we're going hiking. They're coming up because they exist in our lives. Am I good enough? Am I going to, be a burden? These are things that come up in our lives anyways, and so it really is an opportunity to work with them in a safe environment. Um, yeah.
Right. And that's so interesting, isn't it? That, they're probably doing that in their life back home too.
Yeah.
Right. Right. How cool is that? And how do my guess is, and you can correct me, is it allows them to receive compassion from other people. It sort of demands them, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Right.
And we really do, because there's a mindfulness focus. If somebody is going at a slower pace, or we need to shift the events or the gear around in order to accommodate whatever needs somebody might have, that's all part of a mindfulness practice. So walking meditation is something that is part of a lot of meditation retreats. And so it's an opportunity to really then bring our attention into the moment and the sounds and the sights, as opposed to getting to the destination, which again is like a beautiful
Mm.
metaphor. It provides all these metaphors for what we're going to put our attention on and what we're going to focus on.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is like pretty much whatever comes up, I'm guessing, on your retreats. I haven't been lucky enough to go on one yet, but I have definitely got it on my bucket list of things to do soon. But whatever shows up is obviously the stuff they could probably bring back to their therapist and be like, this is the list, you know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and it's so interesting. You never know what it's going to be. But I did a retreat in Anza Borrego last year, and one woman, had never been camping, and so for her, her biggest fear was going to the bathroom outdoors. And to this day, she's like, it changed my life. Going poop in the desert was like the best thing I've ever done. It taught me so much, and I think it's that, facing a fear and accomplishing it it's so simple, but it's so tangible. Whereas sometimes in our lives, to accomplish a goal, it takes a really long time and it feels disconnected in some way.
Right.
And so to go like, okay, my goal is to go to the bathroom in the woods today and then do it, you're like, yes.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, again, that's the simplicity of nature. There's not so many steps. You know, if I want to
Yeah.
achieve something, I have to take many, many steps to achieve it. But that is, yeah, absolutely. I never really thought of it that way. What a wonderful experience. Right. And so what is, in your opinion, like what my hope in today's podcast is to paint a picture for maybe even those who haven't really had a lot of experience in nature, or even for those who do but kind of want a way to sort of connect, is to paint me a picture of the moment for you, the mindfulness or the wilderness moment that really defines what it's like for you and your draw to this type of practice.
Hmm. I feel like there's so many different ways I could answer that. So I'll maybe go down a twisty path. But I think what first drew me to the outdoors was I went on an outward bound retreat in Costa Rica for a month in the rainforest. And that led me on the path to get my bachelor's in outdoor education. And then from there, I went and I was a wilderness guide up in Canada. And so on Vancouver Island is where the most imagery for what I love about the outdoors, like where that comes from. And we went on a hike and I got off the boat and there were starfish like this with like 10 legs. And there was orcas and there was walruses and there was eagles and bears. And I mean, it was just like all the wildlife. And then to be hiking in coastal rainforest and have the ocean and the mountains. I mean, it's just so breathtaking. So for me, there's something so grand about that it puts things in perspective. And it just grounds me in a way that's hard for me to put into words. So that's what stands out to me. But as far as people who maybe aren't that into the outdoors, I think one of the great places to start is simply sitting outside and looking at the sky. Like the sky is available to us no matter where we are, even if we're in the city. And so there's a social scientist and neuroscientist called Brian Strayard, I think, or David Strayer. And he's done a lot of research on the benefits of being in nature on our brain. And he has shown that when there's so much information coming in daily that looking at something like the sky, it literally gives our brains a break. It allows the prefrontal cortex to relax. And that opens up creativity and it increases attention.
Right.
And focus. And so even just going outside and looking at the clouds for 5 minutes.
And really observing, which is interesting because the science of OCD is that lit up prefrontal cortex that's on overdrive. That's why this is so cool, because that part of the brain, if you have anxiety or OCD or probably eating disorders as well, is that part of your brain is just revving all day, and there's the sky right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the thing I would mention for people who have anxiety is, please don't get caught into thinking that just looking at the sky is the solution. It's an observation of the sky that is the solution, right? It's the non-judgment of your experience of looking at the sky. It's not the sky itself.
Yes.
Right. So cool. Oh, that's so, I had not heard that research. So that's very, very fascinating.
Yeah.
And so if, let me share something with the listeners and with you, is I, in a couple of weeks, are going on a retreat with Cheryl Strayed, who is the author of Wild.
Awesome.
Right. And Wild is, if anyone doesn't know, Wild is a book about, it's a memoir, I believe, a memoir about how she lost her mother, and she had a somewhat heavy, difficult childhood, and her mother passed away, and she decided to pack her bags and sell everything she had, and she hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which is, I think, it goes all the way through California, up through Oregon.
It starts in Mexico and it goes all the way up to Canada.
That's right. That's right. And she did this for months on
Mm-hmm.
her own. And she talks in depth about being the only woman out there and never having camped or backpacked in her life. But she explains in detail the sounds of her shoe against the floor, of the ground and the dirt, and the feeling of the trees hitting her legs. And I experienced a degree of calm just reading that, as if I was there, right? Which I think
Yeah.
is so cool that, and I hope even today that people can have a little break from their life just by hearing about nature like I did in that situation. And so, but what she did was fairly extreme, right? She went from fully being in, the world to stepping out into nature and throwing herself in. How would you encourage people, let's say if they had very little or limited access to nature, how would you encourage them to, throw themselves in that deep, or what would you suggest?
So there's a couple things that you mentioned that I would like to talk about. I think the way that she did it, the outdoors is becoming a huge, I don't know, attraction right now with REI and all of this stuff. And I think on the one hand, that's amazing. And on the other hand, I worry about the impact that we're going to have on our wilderness and people not knowing. So there's something in the outdoor field called Leave No Trace. And there's 7 principles about how to camp and do that. And so I think that's an important piece. And then also the safety is an important piece, and knowing how to take care of yourself and what to do in case of an emergency. And if you don't have that knowledge, then I do think it's really important to begin that process with other people who do. And so whether that, I think REI does offer a lot of classes. So doing a class, and it doesn't have to be that extreme. If you live in Southern California, then this morning I did a hike to meditate event at Point Dume, and that's super accessible and beautiful. And we sat and we meditated, and to open your eyes to the ocean and feel that calm and hear the sound of the waves. I mean, that it doesn't, you don't have to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail to have that experience.
Right, such a good point. Right, it's got to be close to everyone within driving distance. Right. For me, because I live in the San Fernando Valley, it's interesting for me that because getting into nature would take me a little bit to drive, and just up the road from my kids' daycare, there's a lookout. Right.
Mm,
And for me, just driving to the lookout, even though I'm still in my car, right, which is cheating, I should be getting out. but
no.
but there is something even about looking down over the city that
Yeah,
puts my life in perspective of,
yeah.
oh, you're worried about, that you were late for that client. When you're up so high, none of that really matters,
Right.
because look at the degree of what's happening. So it's not even so much nature, but it's perspective.
Yeah.
It's this perspective change, which, I am out in nature. I'm seeing the outdoors, but even that switch was really powerful for me.
Absolutely. And I also think with Cheryl Strayed and Wild, one of the things that I do think is important is finding time to be alone. Or my friend, I call them solos, and my friend calls them a date with her soul, which I really
I
like.
love.
And that's something that I also incorporate onto all the retreats. And I think that if people can find time to do things, and whatever their comfort level is, whatever your comfort level is, you can go for a 10-minute walk alone, and that can be your solo.
Mm.
Or you can go to Joshua Tree and spend the night. But I think pushing yourself to face the fears that come up when we're alone are really important. And I know a lot of people have fears around that. And so that's why I think doing it on retreat is really nice, because you can come back to a group and you know that someone's there holding the space for you.
Right. They'll catch you if it's too overwhelming.
Yes.
Right, right. The thing that about that I love is sort of that community, right?
Yeah.
Almost for me, it's like a sisterhood, right?
Yeah.
When you're out and you're really just kind of roughing it, there's a sisterhood or a brotherhood to that. How do people handle the lack of technology in that? You know, is there, for, I know a lot of my clients who have, let's say, panic disorder, or going out that far actually raises their anxiety because they don't feel like they have a place to go that will be their safe place, whether it be the hospital or, you know, they could pick up their phone if they needed to. So how do people manage that? And what is your advice in terms of, you know, disconnecting from technology?
I definitely think that people experience that a lot. I've had people, it raises their anxiety a lot. Some people love it, and some people, it definitely increases their anxiety. And I think, one, I will say it has to be something that you're interested and ready to do.
Mm.
So if that feels like it's going to be so overwhelming that the tolerance threshold is too much, then it's probably not the right time. That being said, I've worked with a lot of people who, yes, it increases their anxiety in the first day, especially I've had that with parents, not being able to have contact with their kids. And I think to watch the evolution and the growth that can come from that it's so amazing, because you really have to begin to build a trust in yourself, a trust that everything will be okay, a trust that whatever happens, you'll figure it out, that's there, and that the phone is not the thing that's gonna save you.
Right. And what a powerful message, because I think that for those who have anxiety, that's the underlying everything of but I don't know how I'll handle it. Right. And it's like the phone is almost a problem. The phone is a problem because it's a false sense of security. You know, if something bad happened, me having my phone isn't actually probably going to save my life. It might be able to get me access to help, but not to the degree in which my anxiety tells me it will save my life.
Right.
Right.
And if you're in a life-threatening situation, whether if we're base camping, the nearest, there's still I'm trained as a wilderness first, aid responder. So, and hospitals are close by. And when I do the backpacking, I have a satellite phone. There's, the perceived risk is much higher than the actual risk.
Right. That's it, isn't it? Which is kind of life.
Totally. Yeah.
Again, it's the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. We won't call it a mirror. Maybe we call it like the reflective lake.
Yeah.
The lake is reflecting our life back at us, or our fears back at us, which is so powerful. Right. So is there something else that you would like to share? Of course, I'm going to ask you more about how people can get in touch with you at the end, but is there something I've not asked you that's important that I ask you, or is there a concept that is important?
I know that there was something that I wanted to say earlier and I had forgotten, but so thank you for asking this, because I'm not quite sure how to talk about it, but I think it's really important. And I can even feel getting a little nervous saying it, but there is a huge issue, I think, around inclusion in the outdoor field. You mentioned that, when she was Cheryl Stray was doing the trip, she was one of the only women. I think the outdoor community has done an amazing job at bringing in more women, and I think that I see a lot more women out there. However, in terms of race, and that part, I think the outdoor community still has a long way to go. And able-bodiedness. I'd say that making it feel really accessible for just for everybody. And I just think that's an important part of the conversation, and I know that's something that I think about a lot. But I do think that the council and nature is a great way to begin, because it puts down all those barriers. And so I think coming together in nature is a way to begin, like it would be good to begin that conversation in nature.
Right, right. And just to clarify, when you talk about council, what does that look like?
So council is something, there's a lot of different background traditions. I was taught it by the woman up on Vancouver Island who was a First Nations there. And so I think it has that background, and here the Native American background, although I don't know if they do it anymore. And so we come together and sit around, listen from the heart, and talk from the heart. And it's really about having everybody go around the circle and share their truth, whatever feels important to them, and hearing what other people's truths are, and not really leaving until that is complete, and knowing that that's complete when everybody goes around the circle and has nothing left to say. So that doesn't mean if people have to go to the bathroom and stuff like that, but that the conversation is really meant to be done with intention. And yeah.
Right. And I'm guessing that's very an emotional circle.
It can be. It varies, you know. I would say on the 3-day base camping retreats that I do, it tends to be pretty emotional because we're doing more in-depth work. We're doing more breath work and sound baths and a lot of meditation, a lot of journaling, a big solo experience. Whereas on the backpacking trips, we're hiking more. And so sometimes the councils everybody's like, I'm so tired, you know, and it's funny and lighthearted. And then we end it really quick and, you know, right. But yeah, definitely, it has the potential to go to very deep and moving places.
Right. Right. And it makes sense. Like if you had to go out solo, the human needs to debrief that, right? There has to be an offload when you're in solo or a date with your soul, which I love both of those. Yeah, holding that in would almost be like consequential, I would imagine. Not entirely, but in some cases.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. So, is there anything else that I should have asked you or is important for people to know in your opinion?
No, I think that's it. It's been so great speaking with you.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Again, it's fascinating to me that I have been in the office since 8 o'clock and I have had back-to-back clients, and it does feel a little like you get cooped up. But for me, even just the discussion of it feels like a release. I feel like I've been in the nature just hearing about it, which that's crazy and powerful to me. That you know, I think that that there is I can feel almost that brain sort of switching.
Well, that's that whole thing with visualization, right? It's like athletes do visualization, and our brain often, if we can imagine something or visualize something or feel it, embody it,
right,
then our brain, it's not that far off from actually doing it.
Right, right. So. Which is interesting because if we're cruel to ourselves, our brain assumes that must be real too.
Yeah.
Which is, again, our intention and what we're doing is so important.
Yes.
Right. So tell us a little bit about where people can hear about you. And I know you have a very cool event coming up. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I have a 3-day event coming up in Joshua Tree. It is October 20th through the 22nd. And I'm so excited about it. I have private campground, which I'm actually going to go check out tomorrow to scout a little bit more. But there's going to be someone cooking for us. There's someone doing breath work. I have someone doing yoga and sound baths. So, which I don't know if you've ever had a sound bath laying on the ground with the sunset, but it is definitely something you should do in your
I
lifetime.
mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking
Yeah.
about this. Yeah,
So
what an
I
incredible
will be doing the
experience.
solo and the council. Yeah, so that's coming up in October. I'm really excited about that. And you can find out all the information at zeeadventures.life. And you can also find me on Facebook at Zee Adventures or on Instagram at Zee Adventures. And um, yeah, I think that's all the places. And then my personal practice also sometimes it's easier to remember is zoegillis.com.
Right.
So
And I will link to those in the show notes on my website if anybody, is driving and they can't write that down or don't remember it. I'll have it in the show notes for them to link to as well. And so for them, it's Zee Adventures, like Zoe.
yep,
Yeah,
Zee Adventures and
fantastic.
then dot life like Life.
Right. Such an
Yeah.
appropriate. The whole .com wouldn't sound right, right? That would be too techy. It needs
Yeah.
to be life. It makes total sense. It's
Yeah.
congruent. I love it. Right. Well, thank you. I feel like you've actually brightened my day, which you always do.
Oh,
But these discussions, I think, are so powerful, and there's so much truth to what you're saying, and I feel like that's such a rich experience to go and really look at yourself in those very wilderness kind of situations. So thank you so much for sharing, and I really am going to be there when I can. I just think this is going to be a life-changing experience for people who attend.
thank you so much. I hope that some of this was valuable for anybody who's listening. And as always, it's so nice talking to you. And I love that I get to see you on here
I
too.
know, I know. And so, for those who are listening too, if you want to sort of, I will upload the video to YouTube on my YouTube channel, which is Kimberly Quinlan LMFT. If people would prefer to watch, look at your groovy hat. I love. Very cool. Well, thank you. And just for listeners, please do note that this podcast should not replace your mental professional health care. If you feel like you would benefit by mental health care, please reach out to a professional near you. Have a wonderful day.